I was 34 years old when a coworker asked me a simple question, and I realized I didn't know the answer. She asked, "How did that make you feel?" And I just sat there. Not because I was upset. Because I genuinely didn't know. It was a Tuesday afternoon, nothing special about it. I worked at a mid-sized marketing firm downtown, the kind of place with glass walls and standing desks and a coffee machine that everyone complained about but no one fixed. I was good at my job. I was known for staying calm under pressure. People used to say it like a compliment, "Nothing rattles you." I used to take pride in that. I thought it meant I was strong. That day, we just lost a client we'd worked on for 8 months. My manager delivered the news in a quick meeting, apologized, moved on to the next agenda item. Everyone else in the room looked deflated. One woman, Priya, actually looked like she might cry. I remember watching her face and feeling a strange kind of distance, like I was observing the moment through glass instead of standing inside it. Afterward, Priya caught me in the hallway. She said, "That really sucks. How are you doing with it?" And I said, "I'm fine, it's just a client." She looked at me for a second longer than felt normal and said, "You always say that." Not in a mean way. More like she was noticing something out loud for the first time. I brushed it off. I went back to my desk and finished a report. I didn't think about the conversation again until later that night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling the way I sometimes did when my mind wouldn't settle. Her words kept circling back. "You always say that." I started thinking about other moments. My grandmother's funeral 2 years earlier, where I'd been the one comforting everyone else, dry-eyed, organized, handling the logistics while my cousins cried in the parking lot. A breakup in my late 20s where my ex told me, almost as a parting shot, "I don't think you've ever actually let me see you upset. Not once. In 3 years." At the time I'd taken it as an insult to my character, like she was accusing me of hiding something. Now, replaying it, it felt less like an accusation and more like an observation she'd made too late to do anything about. I'd always assumed I was just even-tempered. Low drama. The kind of person who didn't need much. I'd built a quiet sense of identity around it, the reliable one, the steady one, the one who didn't fall apart. It never occurred to me to ask why I didn't fall apart. I just thought some people were built that way. The next few days, I found myself paying closer attention to my own reactions, almost like I was studying a stranger. A client yelled at me over email, and I noticed I felt nothing, not anger, not hurt, just a flat kind of neutrality, like reading a weather report. A friend canceled plans last minute, and I told her it was fine, and it genuinely was fine, but I started wondering if fine was the only setting I had. I mentioned it to Priya a few days later, half joking, over coffee. I said something like, "Do you think it's weird that I don't really get upset about things?" She didn't laugh. She just looked at me and asked, "Do you think you don't get upset, or do you think you don't notice when you are?" I didn't have an answer. The question sat there between us, and I remember feeling a small flicker of unease, like she'd pointed at something I'd walked past my whole life without seeing. That night I called my mother, which wasn't something I did often, not out of any tension between us, just habit. We didn't talk about feelings much. Our calls were logistics, work, weather, what my brother was up to. But that night I asked her something I'd never asked before. I asked what I was like as a kid. Not in a loaded way. Just curious. She laughed a little and said I was so easy. She said I barely cried, even as a baby. She said by the time I was 5 or 6, I'd stopped coming to her when I was upset. I'd just go quiet, go to my room, sort it out myself. She said it like it was a point of pride, like she was telling me I'd been a low-maintenance kid in a house that didn't have room for high-maintenance ones. She mentioned, almost in passing, that things had been tight back then: money, my dad's job, a lot of tension in the house that she and my father were dealing with. She said, "You just never added to it. You always seemed like you could handle yourself." I sat with that sentence for a long time after we hung up. You could handle yourself. I'd been praised, my whole life, for not needing anything. And somewhere along the way I'd internalized that not needing anything was the same as being okay. I started reading about it, actually reading, the way I did when I wanted to understand something instead of just feel my way through it. I came across the term emotional neglect, not abuse, nothing dramatic, just an absence. A childhood where physical needs are met but emotional ones are quietly overlooked, not out of cruelty, but because the adults around you are stretched too thin to notice, or were never taught to notice themselves. Children in that kind of environment don't usually grow up angry. They grow up capable. They grow up self-sufficient. They grow up, like me, mistaking numbness for strength. It reframed almost everything. The funeral where I organized instead of grieved. The breakup where I never let anyone see me upset, not because I was strong, but because some younger version of me had learned, a long time ago, that being upset didn't get noticed, so there was no point in being upset out loud. I hadn't suppressed my emotions through some act of willpower. I had simply never been taught the language for them. You can't perform a feeling you were never given words for. There's a particular kind of quiet that settles over you when you realize a trait you were proud of is actually a scar wearing a costume. I didn't feel devastated by this. That would almost have been easier. Devastation is at least a feeling, and I would have known what to do with it. What I felt instead was something closer to disorientation. Like discovering the floor of your house is a few inches lower than you always thought, and now every step feels slightly wrong. I went back to Priya about a week later and told her what I'd been realizing. I expected her to be surprised. She wasn't. She said she'd suspected something like that for a while, ever since the client meeting, the way I'd watched everyone else's reactions instead of having my own. She said it gently, without judgment, and asked if I wanted to actually sit with how I felt about all of it, right there, instead of turning it into another report to file away. So I tried. It was awkward. I didn't have practice. I said I felt sad, and then immediately followed it with an explanation, a justification, something to make the sadness make sense, old habits. She just said, "You don't have to explain it. You're allowed to just feel it." That sentence stuck with me more than almost anything else that week. What I understand now, looking back, is that the people who called me strong weren't wrong, exactly. I was capable. I could handle things. But capability isn't the same as wellness, and self-sufficiency isn't the same as health. Somewhere between childhood and adulthood, I'd confused the absence of visible pain with the absence of pain itself. And nobody around me had any reason to question it, because I never gave them a reason to. I was, by every outward measure, fine. I think about how many people walk around like this, praised for being low maintenance, admired for never falling apart, quietly convinced that needing comfort is some kind of weakness they've successfully avoided. We reward the symptom and call it a personality. And the person living inside it often has no idea anything is missing, because you can't miss what you were never shown existed. I still catch myself going flat sometimes, watching my own life from a slight distance instead of standing inside it. But now, at least, I notice. I ask myself the question Priya asked me that first day. Not, am I fine? But how do I actually feel? Some days I still don't know the answer right away. I've started to think that's alright. Noticing the question at all is further than I ever used to get. I wonder sometimes about the version of me that existed before I learned to go quiet, the small kid who probably did cry, did ask for things, before figuring out it didn't change anything. I wonder what he would think if he could see me now, 34, sitting with a feeling instead of filing it away. I'd like to think he'd be relieved. I'd like to think somewhere in there, he's still waiting to be asked how he feels, and finally getting an honest answer.